Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Outdoor Collective. Kyle, it is our time that we get to hang out, and so glad to have you back here. Hey, just before we get started, man, first of all, I want to thank Jordan for last week. He did a great job, but I want to thank all of our listeners for showing up week after week. Listen, I don't know how many people, even people just out of the blue, said, "Hey, man, great podcast. That was really cool." And so we just want to thank you all. Please share it with your friends. Please go out and subscribe. Please make sure you review it on all the different places that you hear it. And Kyle, one of the cool things I noticed is this YouTube thing with this video of us. I don't know why, but actually it's getting as many listens as a podcast. So I think that's
Yeah.
I think that's kind
Well,
of
I think when
a fun
people,
kind of thing.
well, and to your point, when people search for things that this is why liking things and subscribing things or interest, it moves you up a list for people to randomly come across organically
Mhm.
versus being recommended or, like, that Facebook thing where like, hey, recommend, or, people get sick
Yeah.
of those. Sometimes they do. And so it's important to have those up there to kind of climb the ranks. If you think it's good stuff, give it a like.
Yeah, for sure. And by all means, tell people about it. Just yeah, we like the reviews, but we also like we also like the organic coming from you. People saying, "Yeah, my buddy told me about this. This is cool." So thanks for that.
Yep.
Thank you guys for doing that. Hey, Kyle, man, you had a pretty awesome week last week. Looking at your pictures, I get a chance to talk to you on Sunday. We wanted to just take time tonight to just kind of rehash out, mostly because I think, especially here in the tri-state, and I would bet around the states in general, when it
Mhm.
comes to the Northeast, other than the end of the AT as you're walking north,
Yeah.
it doesn't get a lot of play. It doesn't get a lot of
No.
push as far as places to go, hiking to see. And I'll tell you what, between you and then I was talking with another a friend who was is it Arcadia State Park that's up there, or National
That's
Park that's up
Maine.
there, up in Maine. I'll tell you what, some of the pictures I saw coming from last week just blew my mind. Like, that place is just amazing up there.
Yeah.
And so wanted to highlight your trip, highlight the places you went, and also just kind of highlight why why we think it's so cool up there, some of the history and some of that stuff as well. So, uh, yeah, like lay it on me. Like, you guys planned to be gone. You were gone. Were you up there 5 days, or was it a whole seven?
We were Pennsylvania night one, South Vermont night two, then New Hampshire for 2 nights, and then Vermont for the next four, and then one night in, gosh, what's the name of it? I don't remember. Cleveland. It's called
Yeah,
Mentor.
mm-hmm. Something like that. Mm-hmm.
Kind of east of Cleveland there a little bit, and that was the trip.
I
So
gotcha.
yeah, I mean, we, just like I told you, gonna go out 2 podcasts ago. I told you I was gonna go to 2 states I hadn't never been to before, which was New Hampshire and Vermont. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of course, like a little schoolboy, I'm all giddy about learning stuff and where to go and whatever else,
Yeah, for sure.
and wanted to do a really nice hike at Franconia, in that area there, one of the bigger 4,000 peaks that they have there,
Mm-hmm.
and got up there and just looking at the hike. We went up a hillside, and on Sunday, I think we had been there and realized that we probably weren't in the best shape to be doing an 8,000 up and down, and I think it was like 12 miles around or something like that, somewhere around in there. But we weren't going to do that,
Uh-huh.
so we picked a smaller hike. But just right off the bat, getting up into that area, and I noticed the architecture was different. Houses were, if you literally, like, I kept jokingly calling it colonial Vermont and colonial
Yeah.
New Hampshire. I would say
Right.
the colonial church. There's colonial people, because in my mind it's like the old world. And
Mm-hmm.
and when you go up there, the architecture is different. You think of, like, what did George Washington live in? Oh, a house like that. And
Yeah.
that's literally what you were seeing everywhere. And you don't get to see that in Indiana. Indiana wasn't even a territory at that point in time when Vermont was a
Mm-hmm.
state. But just an area that I felt like you're going back into. That sometimes I could close my mind at places and you could see people going by, you know, um, in wagons and horses and on horseback, and no cars around, and no electricity, no indoor plumbing, no power. And like, I really liked the thought of that. It's
Yeah.
primitive, and just colonial is a good way to describe it. Like, definitely civilization, but pre-discovery of the rest of the U.S. for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think I did. I think I did kind of fix one of your quotes because you called it a colonial mountain, and I'm pretty sure the mountain was there way pre-colonial.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
just a little
that
joke
was
there.
part of our little fun. I kept referring to my dog. His name went from Jake to Jacob to make him
Jacob.
sound more colonial. But I would say, what a lovely colonial day, or that's a lovely colonial house, or this is a lovely colonial shop, and people
Yeah.
were laughing about it or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thanks for the correction. You're right. Long before it was pre-colonial,
Yeah.
prehistoric.
Prehistoric colonial pre-colonial historic whatever. However, but so like, dude, like, so you get there, you're in. You said South Vermont the first night or the first day.
Yep.
You're actually out and about doing stuff.
Yep.
What are some of the stuff you did that first day, and what kind of stood out to you, that kind of thing?
Well, the first day we used this app that I had never tried before called Hip Camp, HIPCAMP, Hip Camp, and you basically can like stay in people's front yards or side yards or barn property or cabin even, whatever like that.
I'm
Um,
writing that down. Hip
yeah,
camp.
do it Hip Camp, just like like where hippies would camp at Hip Camp. But
Mm-hmm.
we stayed in the first night at this guy's farm lot, basically really nice. Didn't see anybody or no ant, no dogs running around. It was quiet. Got a couple inches of rain while we were there, but didn't talk to the guy. It was $25. The hotel we had on the way back was 150. So I mean, there's some contrast to save some coin and do other things you want to do. So that was on that app. We used that app again for our this cabin that we rented in Vermont for 4 days. We used that app to find that as well. But yeah, so we stayed there. That was nice, and that was by this really cool old. So if you want something cool to look at, if you like old abandoned buildings with a lot of history, there's the Green Mountain Racetrack. Is something to look at. They built it for like $6 million in '65, and it's just out in the middle of nowhere. When you're driving along Highway 7 in South Vermont, you look over and there's like, I don't know, it was it seemed like it was 5 or 6 stories tall, like an old abandoned steel mill, but it's the grandstands like all indoors of this 1960s horse racing track.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So we pulled over there and tried to get some pictures, but we didn't want to trespass. There was a fence and it was blocked off. You could see where people had been going in there and doing like, stealth videos in there, undercover videos, whatever. But that was
Mm-hmm.
cool to see. So did that the first day, the second day, and then drove up to straight to New Hampshire. Went through Vermont, and there's like so many little towns there. They've done a really good job of keeping them up. One thing that was cool is you're going past buildings that have little signs on them. The year the house was built, like
Yeah.
1784, 1804, 1792. They're just on
Wow.
the cornerstones of the building, so you can see what year they're built. Just right there, it's like emblazoned on there. That was really cool. Like I drove by my neighborhood, and there's a house from 2009. So it's
Was
quite
it,
a
yeah. Is it
quite
your
a bit
house from 2021?
yeah, mine's a 2021. But
Yeah.
you look at that, and like some states, Alaska or Arizona had its 50-year celebration, and New Hampshire's had its 200-year.
You're right.
So I
Exactly.
mean, you look at the difference in that. Pretty crazy there for that. But anyway, so we did that, and we decided where we wanted to hike. So we got into New Hampshire. Just colors were perfect. Elevations about 1,800 feet, 1,600, 1,800 feet. Colors were changing. Maple everywhere, hardwoods everywhere, some
Mm-hmm.
pine mixed in. But just like when you close your eyes and picture a fall day with the sun out, we had that for like 5 days in a row. It was amazing. And so we did a little uphill on Saturday just to get or on Sunday, just to get the legs warmed up, and did maybe, I don't know, 1,000 feet up, 800,000 feet up and down. But it's getting dark, so we wanted to get back. And that trail was really, really tree root, and tree roots and headlamps or sprained ankles waiting to happen.
Right.
And so we
Exactly.
did that on the way back. Jake, for some reason, wouldn't cross the stream. I don't know, he got all weird and ran back off the leash or let go of the leash, and he ran back like towards the car and was barking a bunch and whatever, and didn't want to go back across it. And then we went and got him. And then on the way back through, he kind of went through there after that. I don't know what he was getting all nervous about. So that was kind of funny. We went uphill and then came back down, and he runs across the thing like he didn't even care. So I thought maybe it was the water or the sound, because it was really, really rushing and really loud, there by the Brooks Run trailhead.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so that was fun. We thought we'd warm our legs up, and then went back to a campground at Campton, New Hampshire. So that was, if you want to write that down, really nice campground. We were actually there until the last day it closed, or sorry, the last day it was open. They like came by and said, "Hey, we're closing the gate at 10." So, we're packing up everything, go, so we'll be out of here in time. But they had a really kind of cool, but you put quarters into this machine. If you put 250 in there, you got a 5-minute shower with hot water.
Sweet. That sounds like a place we know and love called Miguel's.
Is that the way it is there too?
And Miguel's is $1. It's $1 for 4 minutes. But yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good. Our money would have went a lot further. But anyway, so we were like 5th or 6th in line sometimes to get a shower there. That was cool. Sure. Stayed at that campground. But then the hike of the time was going up Mount Tecumseh, which is like the trail parallels a ski run there. And if you got off the trail there, you could go up to that. Met some really cool people up there. Shout out to Corey and Hallie. They were both hiking up there, and they're I think in education. Their husbands were back home and they were out hoofing it, which is really cool. Gave them some podcast stickers and a patch, but they were pretty much at the top of the hill. We started at 1,600 and then went to 4,003. But Rick, 0 switchbacks for that. So it was really short hike. It was like 4 point something miles total, but 0 switchbacks. Yeah. And like my nemesis stairs were pretty much the last, 3/4 a mile or so were 12, 14, 18-inch, 20-inch stairs the whole way. I'm up through that. And, knee was pretty good on that, but popped out on the little side of the ski run and got a picture there. That was the Colonial picture you made a funny comment on. And then we went all the way to the summit and back down. And, again, my legs on the way down on those rocks towards the last mile were, I'd have stopped and paused. They were jackhammering a little bit, but yeah. So, but it was cool, man. It's a good hike. I recommend Mount Tecumseh. People kept passing us by though and saying, "Hey, are you guys doing the 48s?" We'd stop. They'd mostly stop and talk about the dog, but they say, "Hey, are you doing the 48s?" So we said, "What's the 48?" So I guess in that New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine area, there's 48 different peaks that are above 4,000 feet. Wow. So I had no idea. Think about that. 48 peaks above 4,000 feet there. Well, so it's kind of like the 14ers in Colorado, I suppose. But obviously at 4,000 feet, not quite the grandeur of Colorado. But
if you're starting at, if you're starting at 8, 6, 8, even 1,200, that's still pretty good. Uh-huh.
Yeah, for sure.
48 peaks over 4,000.
Yep. Yeah, 48. I mean,
yet we sleep on that area all the time. Like, you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks you got to go out west, and yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it was neat to see that. I mean, I'd looked it up, but it says that there's 48. New Hampshire has 48 mountains that are over 4,000 feet in elevation at any one point in time. Thousands of hikers are working towards their goal of climbing them all. Each of the 4,000 footers has at least one well-established trail to its summit. Most of the 4,000 footers offer several different routes. I know that there were people that passed us on the way up. I'm thinking, how in the heck are we coming down and they were passing us going the other way? I'm thinking, how in the heck are they going to get to the top and back down? They must not care to do headlights or headlamps, or whatever. And then a woman had passed us going up the hill carrying her baby in a little front pack. And I thought, man, I almost fell 4 or 5 times. She must do this a lot and never pass us on the way back down. So I'm thinking, man, we even had some kids go across it. We're like, 2 of them were in shorts and only one of them had a backpack, but I don't know anything about that. We're probably halfway down, probably at, like 3,200 feet elevation, 3,000. These kids are passing us. But as we drove around to leave the next day, to leave that section to go back to Vermont, we drove down this road called Tripoli Road, and there was another path up to that same mountain. From that, we figured that they were parking at one and going to the other side, and that was where they're doing it or getting dropped off or whatever was their over and back. They weren't doing over and backs. They're just doing it through. So, I mean, I hope they were. We didn't see any crazy reports about missing hikers. So that was good too.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah. But my Lone Peaks that I'd never been hiking in definitely did when I was done do not look pristine anymore.
So you're yeah, you went with the non waterproof ones and kind of messed them up a little bit. You did tell me that as far as that goes. So that was Tuesday. Then you were at Tecumseh, with Mount Tecumseh.
That was Monday,
Okay.
and then stayed the night there Monday, and then Tuesday headed back to Vermont. To the to that little off the grid cabin that we had rented there to do our adventures from the rest of the week.
So then, how you say off the grid? How far outside of a town or out?
It was out in no cell signal. It was somebody had built a cabin about 200 yards away from there. The landowner there, Todd is his name, had built his this cabin to stay in basically on this little pond out in the back of his property. I think he had 20 acres there, and really nice place, quiet, no light pollution at all. So off the grid, the cabin was, I don't know, he had electricity at his house, but as far as getting on anything to do with internet or social media or whatever, forget it. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And then you, like you said, that was base camping. You go from there and out and about the next couple of days.
Yeah, I would basically drive, and my navigator would say, "Turn left back there."
There you go. Yeah, well, I've had one of those navigators before.
No. She did a good job. Did a really good job. It was good. We talked before on the show about being, it's okay to be picky about who you do things with in the outdoors, And I went on car rides with people down to Red River Gorge or whatever, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, can we have some quiet time? Type of thing. And it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that at all. It was it was like just a good amount, a good mix, good companion to be on the road with for sure. And the same interest level as well. So it's thought, hey, what can we do? We had a list of itinerary things to go and do.
That's cool. So then in Vermont, was it mostly towns, or were we back to hiking and doing that kind of stuff again?
We did a good mix of both. We really went from like a climbing thing to, man, I want to see some more of the architecture. We went across this really cool farm market on our way from New Hampshire back into Vermont called the Four Corners Market. And man, they had the best cheese. They grew it all there too. It was like, you ever been to one of those stands where that they're buying it from somebody else and putting their own label on it?
Right.
The greenhouses were on site. They were growing everything there. I mean, it was unbelievable. We got stuff for your favorite foil packets. Got some some organic, some Italian spicy pork sausage that we made in our packets, and got green beans and other things to put onions and potatoes and everything grown right there to put in these foil packets. It was an awesome stop. It was really, really cool and super picturesque, a really nice old home. And they kept good care of it. And this was in their barn. It was kind of like half of the bottom floor was underground, like in ground, and the other floors were above it. That was really cool. And then ended up back at in Plymouth, Vermont, was where the hip camp location was. And man, if you want to go someplace, and I had to boil my bath water every night on top of the wood stove so that I had hot bath water, because I wasn't going to pay $250 to go to a camp somewhere to do that. But so it's pretty much like, oh, that warm water feels so good, and then you're freezing like 10 seconds later till you pour another cup on you.
Yeah.
But that was my bath for a while with that. So that was definitely cool. But man, totally off the grid, no electricity, no whatever. Only source of heat was a wood stove. So that was an adventure for 4 nights. That was really cool.
That's awesome. I tell you what, we had talked about this. That area is so rich in history, in heroes, from the Revolutionary War, men that and women that did amazing things. And you told me this, and I want to talk more about that. You told me that you could see it. I mean, you could almost see it and almost feel it just in the air around that kind of thing. And so here's what I want to go ahead and do. Let's go ahead and take our commercial. And then when you come back, I'd love to hear some of that history and stuff you saw, and and love to hear. I know you kind of got you got kind of excited about learning about at least one in particular. And so let's go ahead and take our commercial break. We'll do that, and when we come back, we'll let you kind of throw that history, because I know that's another cool thing that we like doing around here, is just kind of teaching people, informing of things that are out there. So
yeah, what's out in the world.
Cool. So everybody, we'll see it right after this commercial break. Welcome back, everybody, to the Outdoor Collective. As we're going to break, I told you that we had some really cool stuff going on. Kyle, you were in the Northeast, two of the original 13 states of the United States. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. Yeah,
okay,
Vermont.
I thought so. My history went out the window just as I said that, and then the look on your face made me go, maybe I'm dumber than I think. But like I said, some of the original 13 states, the states themselves are 200 and what now? 200, and they'll be 250 years old here in a couple years. And you talked about the architecture and the history of that area. And while you were there, I know you, and so I know you geeked out on some of that history, some of that Revolutionary War stuff, some men and some women that lived around that time. So, you know what? I love to hear some of the stuff that you learned, some of the things you I know you went to. Did you go to a couple forts, maybe even? What'd you have for us on that stuff?
Well, I think what really, to tie this into what the Outdoor Collective, when we doing things in the outdoors, there's a fort called Fort Ticonderoga, and it's at Lake Charles. Mm-hmm. And the fort passed hands a bunch of times in its short history, like 20 years. It'd been British, and then French, and then American, and back and forth all over the place in this time frame. And I heard the story of the Green Mountain Boys from Vermont that captured Ticonderoga and then took the cannons from Ticonderoga all the way, which is New York, all the way across Vermont to Boston to use to fight the British there. Now, that was 300 miles of dragging cannon. So, I wondered what it took to do that. When I first heard about that, I thought that it's a road system now that you don't drive anywhere straight right now because of mountains. And back then there weren't roads. I don't know what the roads were like, or the logging trails were like, or whatever they had back then. But some of those cannons, there was one big enough. I posted a picture. They had one sitting there, probably wasn't supposed to do it, but I put my dog in it. It was big enough to fit my dog into the muzzle of where the mortar comes out. And some of those were 10,000 pounds a piece. So they drug.
And that was one of the smaller ones, wasn't it?
That's a mortar. That's one of the smaller ones. Yeah. That thing was still probably 10K. That thing was still, I don't know. That one's probably like 3 ton. So it's like 6,000 pounds for that thing. It's just, solid iron. Yeah. So anyway, I thought, what would it I just got done, doing a 4-point-something mile up and back. These guys were doing it for 58 days, Rick. It took them 58 days.
And they're pulling how many cannons?
Well, they moved cannons. As far as the number that they drove across there, they did 300 miles in 56 days. They used oxen and ice sledges. And they arrived in Boston on January 25th. They took 59 cannons and mortars from Fort Ticonderoga in northern New York, and brought them back to Boston in order to fight the British. It says, here's a quote from the campaign. Now, you can figure any trail you've walked on is nice, and you got some of those that are paved. Like you can walk holding hands side by side if you want. You have some that are single file or whatever. It doesn't matter. Can you imagine back then, without a semi truck, locomotive, anything like that, using sledges in the snow to get it December 17th to get cannon 300 miles that weighed anywhere from 3 ton all the way to 4 ton, 5 ton, 6 ton cannons all the way to fight the British. So here's the quote. It says, "It's not easy to conceive the difficulties we have had in getting them here over the lake, owing to the advanced season of the year and contrary winds, but the danger is now past. 3 days ago, it was very uncertain whether we could have gotten them there until next spring, but now, please God, they must go. I have had made 42 exceeding strong sleds and have provided 80 yoke of oxen to drag them as far as Springfield, Massachusetts." So, like just the thought of us hiking the trails like we do, and we're like, man, what's your pack weight?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking that, like,
you know,
on top of that, you're carrying everything you own, and your
yeah,
gun and your ammunition.
you're gonna have your musket with you, your black powder rifle. You're gonna have your bedroll on your back. You're gonna have a cartridge case with you that has pre-made cartridges in there, so you don't have to stop and pour powder in and hope it's right. Like everything, you had to carry all of that with you: axes, tools, so that you can cut trees out of the way. You're helping the oxen push. You imagine all that. You want to talk about original trail pioneers? I'll never complain again about things, and I'm certainly not at the top of the hill gonna be assaulted by British with cannon or gunfire. It's just completely a different time of life that people had a hard living at.
How much of that is through Indian territory? How much of that would be?
Oh, all of it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and like you said, if and you're right, how many trees did they have to cut down just to be able to get that through, without chainsaws, without just that 300 miles in 38 days.
That's 300 miles in 56 days.
56 days.
Yeah.
Still.
So I mean,
yeah.
It was, a little under 6 a day.
Yeah.
So yeah, but if you think about that, that's a pretty good pace, man. That's a pretty good pace with cannon. You talk about they went across a land that had 4,000 foot peaks with it. Like, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, you think 6 miles a day? That's not that far. Wait a minute, you're walking, you're setting up camp, you're tearing down camp.
Yeah.
You're cooking all your meals.
You're probably defending yourself every night. You're setting up perimeter. I mean, you're pulling guard duty. You're doing all that every night, and towing cannon. And on top of that, let's talk. I mean, their Lone Peak 5.0s are hanging in there, right?
No.
No.
If they even had shoes.
Yeah, it's like Lone Peak. They would they'd probably be like, wouldn't even wear them if we had them nowadays. They'd be like, what are those?
Yeah, exactly.
They're so used to a hard life. I think here's a couple little facts too about that area that are intriguing. Is that both New Hampshire and New York. So Farmer Rick shows up in Vermont and starts chiseling up some land with a deed from New Hampshire, right? He bought it from New Hampshire. They give him a deed. Here's your property. And then so Farmer Johnson shows up from New York with the same deed for the same piece of property, because those two states were both selling the same land. Yep.
Wow.
So Rick would have plot A, and Johnson would have plot A. They'd both be selling it. So there'd be like disputes over whose land it really was, because nobody really owned it. Vermont was a state just barely in front of Kentucky. So if that tells you how long Vermont was actually in talks with Canada to become part of Canada, because of the way New York and New Hampshire were treating them as citizens.
Oh, wow.
So with that in mind, that led me to the thought of what was happening that they were so frustrated with. Well, New York had sheriffs that would come into the land down there and claim the land as their own from the state of New York that was already established and pretty prominent, because it was up on the Great Lakes and had good commerce out of there. Good, the British had set it up pretty well. There's a lot of different things in that area that led that area to be very powerful, where the sheriffs were the law enforcement figures of the time, the authorities in New York, and they would just come over and take people's farms away from them. So this group of people that were sick of the overburdening government and laws got together, and they formed this militia called the Green Mountain Boys, and they would with guns fight back against New York. Wow. And so one of the biggest leader that they had, the most famous they had, was a guy named Ethan Allen, and he's a pretty tumultuous figure. He has some really good quotes. He got arrested actually for fighting back.
Did he make furniture?
It's in the same name, Rick. I'm not sure that it's his furniture.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
I think there's a store there now. For that, I think your bed was made by Ethan Allen, actually.
my bed might have been made by the real Ethan Allen. Yeah, exactly.
There's chains holding that on.
Yeah.
But Allen was hauled into court for his rebellion, and the king's attorney general, basically for Britain, as they were trying Allen, talked about the governing British being the lord of everything. And Ethan Allen says to the attorney general, "The gods of the valley are not the gods of the hill, and you need to understand that." Basically saying like what goes where you are from doesn't go where I am from. And he's just a big proponent of personal freedom. And, he's basically given the middle finger to the tyrannical British government. And they weren't the only tyrannical figures that were there. New York was the same way. But he's just basically saying where you're from down there in the lowlands doesn't go up here with us. We are not that same type of people.
Well,
And, it was in the name of freedom.
so those sheriffs weren't necessarily. It wasn't during. It wasn't after the Revolutionary War. It was actually before. So those sheriffs would have been under imposing British rule and taking it as part of the British.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the politics of all that. I just know that they had power in the state of New York, and since Vermont wasn't a state, they were just taking it from. It's not like they were just showing up and grabbing land. They were showing up and grabbing land that people had homesteads built on.
But those would have been colonies, not states yet. But yeah, that's where I got mixed up.
Vermont would be in that time frame there. But the sheriffs would just show up and say, "Hey, Rick, you need to leave. This is my farm," and they had enough of it, so they formed armed resistance. And that's where Ethan Allen was famous from. But I love that quote: "The God of the valley are not the gods of the hills, and you shall understand that."
And you shall understand it. And
just to prove it, not an option.
And just to prove it, we're going to take your cannons. And move them 300 miles and fire them on you. How awesome.
Yeah. I mean, 5 years later, he was doing that.
Right. And exactly. And you just don't, in our day and age, there just isn't, at the moment, there's nothing to compare to that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, there's nothing. Like, I live in a log cabin, and I have one of those plaques on my house that says 1827. And even now, looking at you and I have talked about this before, like looking at each of these logs, like somebody took an axe and cut this tree down and then by hand planed it to get both sides flat and get it some kind of reasonable shape. And some of them are, start and go bigger and smaller and figured out how to put this all together, and all by hand, all with hand tools, all by hand. Yeah. And it was just a way harder kind of life. Like life was harder. It was like everything was work.
Yeah, everything was work. It's if you've watched that movie, which is one of my favorites of all time, and I think if you're like an outdoor fan, you should love the movie The Last of the Mohicans. Is great to show movie. Not only beautiful scenery, but the acting's good. That's very periodically, in some regards, correct with uniforms.
I will find you. I'm sorry.
I will find. Yeah, stay alive no matter what.
I will find you.
So I think there's a quote in there by Cora Monroe, who is Monroe's daughter. He's the general of the fort that has to be surrendered to Webb in there. Mm-hmm. And he talks about surrendering the fort there. And as he does so, he's talking about the militia wants release so they can go back and defend their homesteads, because their homesteads, while they're out, by Ethan Allen and his team, and in that movie Hawkeye and his colonial militia is out, they've been called up by the British in there to defend their forts. Well, back home, the Indians that are allied with the French are marauding through and killing women and children that are left behind defenseless, right? So The world needs dangerous men in both places, but they're all in the forts. Well, they want to leave in that movie. And then the British say, well, that's not your policy. You can't just go by your leave. And then Cora Monroe says in that movie about the pioneers, something that the British just don't understand. And she says to the British, they do not live their lives by your leave. They hack it out of the wilderness with their own two hands, burying their children along the way. And so the point of this whole thing, and that is such a quote that like gives me chills to speak it. But the point of that was these people knew it was a hard life, but they wanted nothing to do with the city. They wanted freedom so bad that they knew this was the risk, that they were willing to do the hard things for it. And that speaks to, my DNA is who I am. It speaks to my, every bone in my body to be free and yearn free. And these people understood it.
Right, exactly. And never again would we ever have to. I mean, even if we ever had to live off the grid.
Yeah.
I mean, we have generators, chainsaws, all different. Yes, it would be harder than it is now. Where I've been to Menards 3 times this week working on my bathroom.
Yeah.
It's way different. It would be harder having to make the 2x4 with a chainsaw, but it's still way different. And yet, that there is something that just calls. Just you feel it in your bones sometimes. Like that would be something. I know that there have been times when I've been in the woods, and love being in the woods, but go, man, what would it have been like? What would it be like if I could be the first person to put eyes on something? Like, I've been to lots of cool places, amazing places. Exit Glacier. We all over Red River. I've been in Phoenix, in mountains in Phoenix, and different places where you're like, this path doesn't look like there's a lot of people that been on it. But
Yeah.
there have still been hundreds, probably, if not more, that have, hundreds, if not thousands, that have crested that peak or looked looked off of Eagles. How many people have looked off of Eagles Buttress? Who were these guys that the first one? What would it be like to be the first one to crest that mountain or to crest that hill? Because me and my family are going over there.
Yeah.
To make out our living, kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe that's a.
No. I mean, that's what pressed a lot of these people on, is that they're like, I can have this land and I can work hard here. And it's like they were willing to give up everything, including safety, to make their own way and to be free. And I don't think anybody in the modern world understands that anymore. I think that's lost. It's lost thinking. We would give up seemingly everything to me now for safety, for freedom to be safe. I'm speaking personally how I feel about it. And how I am about things. But
Right.
Back then they didn't care about that. Yeah, I had 10 kids and 3 of them didn't make it to the age of 3. But I was only going to have 7, so now we have 10 to replace the 3 because we need more help on the farm shore. Totally different way of thinking, and that's the way it was. They loved them just the same.
Right. Exactly. And here's a perfect example. Last weekend, I took my kids camping because they didn't have school on Friday. Thursday night, we went camping. We have this old tent that I've had like 8-10 years. We love it. It's an awesome tent. Friday night here in Ohio and Indiana, it just poured. And luckily we got to Leah plays on the in the marching band for school, so we got to see the game. Team won, had a great night. We get out back to the campsite, and we're kind of playing cards underneath the little pop up. Start sprinkling a little bit. Leah gets tired. She goes to bed. Don't think anything of it. Ricky and I are out there playing. She says, "Hey, Dad, the tent's leaking. The tent's dripping."
Oh, wow.
I said, it's okay. It's not that big a deal. And a couple minutes later, she said, "Dad, come here. It's dripping." I'm like, "Yeah," and it'll be okay. No big deal. It's just we'll tough it out. Ricky and I come to bed, and we get to bed. The cot that Ricky's laying on, one end where he had his pillow, is sopping wet, like his blanket is wet. And I said, "Put your head on the other end. We'll make it work. We're just trying to tough it out." And sure enough, where my pillow was sopping wet, and there was a puddle in on the bot underneath it. And I turned my head around and I laid down, and of course it was I laid down, so I went to sleep. I went to sleep.
Yeah.
But
10 seconds later.
But Ricky, I wake up to Ricky over top of me going, "Dad, the tent." And I said, "What?" And he said, "I'm soaking wet." And I said, "Okay, let's find you a different place to lay down." And he said, "No, Dad, the tent." I said, "What?" He said, "It fell." And one end of the tent, it got so wet that the stakes had come up. and like like fell in on it. It's a big long like tunnel almost kind of tent, and one end falls down. And of course, the rain fly is useless then, and the water is just and it's pouring down rain. It's just pouring into this one into the tent where all of our clothes are, where everything is. And I'm like, and I jump up and I had put a shirt on and my shoes and I put a hat on. I run out, try to I pull it to tight, get the stakes back in it, and it's obvious like there is no dry spot anywhere for him. I grab it, I touch his blanket and stuff, his whole cot, his whole sleeping pad, his everything is wet. I look at mine's wetter than it was. Leah's still sleeping. I'm like, yes, I'm proud of it. They're still sleeping. I look on the ground like, is there a place that we can, is there a place dry that we can lay, sleep? Not one dry. I wake up Leah, say, Leah, let's go. We're going home. Luckily, it was 25 minutes away. I said, we'll come back tomorrow. We're only 25 minutes away from the campground. We'll go home. We'll sleep. We'll come back tomorrow, clean up everything. And what I loved about my kids is, I think it was Leah said, Dad, this is the most unmore thing we've ever done in your life. Like, how awesome was it that my kids were like, Dad, we're supposed to stick it out. We're supposed to tough it up. And so I was like, I was kind of proud of that, but at the same time, I was like, dude, there's no hope for this. But coming back to the point was, in these people's time, they just had to sit there and be wet. There was no going 25 minutes home. You were just wet, and you just had to learn to, we're not sleeping tonight, or we're not this tonight. And we just don't understand what that even looks like or feels like.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes I think in the scheme of the landscape of, men that are out there, like there are aspects of me that feel pretty tough. And then when I read about the life of people who lived back then, I'm not really that tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think like I would be a constant complainer in that situation. I would be saying, where are my, Lone Peaks? Where are my Crispies? Where are my whatever? I mean, I'm sure they had tricks and it was different back then, but the other part of that too, did they think there were men tougher than them out there too? Like, I don't know, what was their frame of mind? There's so much it intrigues my mind to wonder about, but the fact that people were willing to fight and die for freedom and to not have things taken by them and not be told how they had to live their lives and that they could make decisions on their own lives and they were smart enough and they were tough enough and all those different things. I think that's something that's just completely lost on the world now, to a world that seemingly wants to be told how to think, act, and feel every day. They didn't want to. They wanted to decide on their own. And there was a government back then that said, no, you don't want to do that. The crown will solve all your needs.
Right. And I think even more than that, the willingness to say, I am going to go and make it work, I think, is such a huge thing. Like, even more than the freedom, even more than just that there is something out there that I want and I'm going to go get it. And it's going to be the hardest thing I've ever done. And every day I got to wake up and make sure I protect my family. Every day I got to make sure I protect, feed the animals or protect the animals, get the crops in the ground, build a house. I'm doing good to go to work, come home, and maybe do a dishes once a night. And just that it's just a completely different. And I think being in those places, I've been to Williamsburg, in Virginia, and seeing that even that, which was the fancy place, the civilized place. But even seeing the history of that stuff, I think is something that ignites. It should ignite something in you when you hear it and think about it.
Yeah. And all in all, just a ton of appreciation for those who went before. From the Revolutionary War to Boone finding the Cumberland Gap and Daniel Boone making all that happen, and this westward expansion. I'm torn between ashamed and wanting to know the truth of really how it went down with Native Americans. Like, I have Native American ancestry, a small fraction, but still, I don't know all that, but I do know that I'm glad that there's men who dared and women who dared and wanted to raise their kids in a different way and wanted to do it their way. And certainly a lot of sacrifice along the way. And just a ton of courage and a ton of backbone. And the original hikers of North America, lugged Canon 300 miles in 56 days. And I'm just blown away by the fact that I'm bitching when I don't have my trekking poles.
Exactly. Or why did I bring this much water? All those kind of things. So awesome.
Yeah.
Hey man,
I've got way too much food.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I tell you what, I love hearing about your ventures. And guys, please make sure that listeners, as you're getting out and you're doing adventures, we'd love to hear about them as well. Post it on Facebook on our Facebook page. Send some pictures to us. Tag us on the Outdoor Collective. Let us on the Instagram page. All those kind of things. We'd love to hear. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love you to be part of this conversation. So find ways that you can join in. And Kyle, I tell you what, last week I said it and it just didn't feel right for me to be the one that said it. I don't know if you heard it.
I did.
And I don't know if you're proud of me for saying it because I finally got it right and I didn't even have to practice it. But can you give us what we say every week and we'll get out of here.
Well, I will do that, but I want to say you and Jordan, I messaged Jordan. You guys did an amazing job last week. I told Jordan, I said, I think I'm going to, at some point back out of this podcast and you can take my spot.
No way. Won't let it happen.
No, I didn't say that, but I said, hey, would you be interested in guest spot whenever one of us is gone on the other one? And then that way the solo deals are a little bit tougher to feel what we have going back and forth. And he did say, if I could speak for him, in his message did say he would absolutely be delighted to help out. He hoped he did a good job. And I think he knows he did. And you guys did a great job knocking that out. When I seen that at first, I was like, damn it. I'm supposed to be doing the first guest in our podcast, but you know what? If I can't make it happen, Rick, we just got done talking about men making things happen, along the way of frontier podcasting in colonial iTunes. You did it. So, but just anyways, to sum it up, Vermont and New Hampshire, if you like Fort Ticonderoga, I think it's Lake Charles, New York. If you want, it's actually Ticonderoga, New York, probably. But anyways, if you want someplace to go, and it looks like a hotel, it's so nicely done. There's probably 100 pieces of Canon on site, maybe a little bit less, maybe more. They have real life and actors there doing the roles. They shoot the cannons, they shoot the muskets. They talk about how the clothes are made. There's a restaurant on site. Everything's so nicely done and well done. And you can see the battlegrounds. You can see the fort. You can see the Mount Defiance where the British mounted cannon and rained cannonballs down on the Americans after the Americans had the fort. There's so much to do there. So if you have a young kid, I sometimes feel that history is slipping away and we'll forget all about it. But it's important to see that this country was once worth something where a lot of people fought over it. And I still believe it's worth fighting for again. So I will just say that.
What a great family thing to show them what people did before. Yes, going to the beach. I've already got, we have beach vacations are awesome. Going to whatever your favorite park is awesome. But what's it look like to show your kids, hey, here's what somebody did for you? I think that's a great sight. Yeah, good call on that.
Yeah, so it's awesome. So I appreciate you nailing down the podcast. I'll go ahead and wrap things up. Just remember, the outdoors is nearly perfect. The only thing missing is you. So get outside.
We'll see you next week, guys. Thanks for being here.
Have a great week.